The scent of pine resin and winter's crisp bite permeated the great hall, yet beneath it coiled a more potent, primal undercurrent, the collective musk of powerful figures gathering for their seasonal ritual. A tremor of awareness skittered across my skin as I pressed myself against the cold, unforgiving stone of the wall, willing myself to dissolve into the shadows among the other young women presented. We were all offerings in a sense, but unlike them, with their perfumed wrists and artfully demure glances perfected through years of expectation. I was a wild sapling thrust among cultivated roses. My hair, the color of unpolished wheat, fell in loose, unadorned waves, a stark contrast to the intricate, symbolic braids worn by those raised within the gilded cage of tradition. I bore no markings of preparation. Straighten your spine, girl. The handler's voice was a venomous hiss, her fingers biting into the flesh of my shoulder like talons. The Alpha Sovereign is in attendance, project some dignity. I bit down on the inside of my cheek, the coppery tang of blood blooming on my tongue. Dignity was a currency reserved for those not bartered away to appease the powerful. Freedom, traded like a bushel of grain. 3 days prior, my world had been the quiet border forest of river mist, my hands stained with earth and herbs. Then the council elders had darkened my cottage door with their proposition, my liberty in exchange for the village's guaranteed security. The silver pendant resting against my sternum, hidden beneath the flimsy ceremonial shift they'd forced me into, felt as heavy as an anvil. My grandmother's final whisper echoed in the stillness of memory. Your spirit, Ara, is the one thing they cannot truly chain unless you hand them the key. The pendant bore the engraving of a wolf in repose, curled protectively around a crescent moon, a relic of the old ways, from a time before dominant rulers held sway with iron fists and those like me became contractual obligations. A deep, resonant groan echoed through the hall as the massive oak doors at its far end swung inward. Silence descended, swift and absolute, as if the very air had been stolen. A figure crossed the threshold, flanked by warriors whose scarred visages spoke of brutal winters and hard-won victories. But it was he, the Alpha Sovereign, who commanded the gravity in the room. He moved with a lethal, effortless grace, each step a study in contained power. Dark pelts draped his broad shoulders despite the hearths blazing against the chill. His gaze swept over the assembly, impassive, a king surveying his domain. Yet when his eyes passed over our line, a flicker, quick as a lightning strike, disrupted the calm of his features, something that made my own heart stutter against my ribs. Those piercing eyes found mine, and the firmament beneath my feet seemed to shift. That one, his voice cleaved the silence, deep and undeniable, the one with the untamed hair and winter's pallor. Every head swiveled toward me, the handler's grip became a vice. Breath fled my lungs, thought evaporated. This was not the plan. I was meant to be overlooked, a token offering from an insignificant village, fulfilling a duty before returning to my quiet, unclaimed life. But the Alpha Sovereign's gaze had settled, pinned me like a specimen, and dismissed all others. I was led to his private quarters like a condemned prisoner, stone corridors lined with faded tapestries swallowing my footsteps. 2 guards flanked me, their presence a silent wall. The sovereign had departed the hall immediately after his declaration, indifferent to the shockwaves of gossip left in his wake. He had chosen the rustic outsider over noble daughters trained from infancy in the arts of courtly grace. Do not entertain thoughts of flight, one guard advised, his tone carrying an unexpected grain of sympathy. The sovereign does not look kindly on defiance. His companions scoffed. Where would she go? None passed the outer gates without King Cadden's express will. Cadden, the name itself felt like a cold blade pressed to my skin. The door before us was a monolith of dark wood, carved with elaborate scenes of wolves coursing beneath a full moon. My grandmother's old tales rushed back, stories of leaders whose spirits were intertwined with wild beasts, of transformations under lunar light. Fantasies I dismissed as an old woman's poetry for a cruel world. "Wait here," the first guard instructed, rapping his knuckles against the dense wood before both men retreated, their footsteps fading down the torchlit hall. Alone, my fingers sought the familiar shape of my pendant through the thin fabric. If I ran now, would I even reach the corridor's end? And what storm of retribution would then break upon Rivermist for my rebellion? The door swung inward, and a wave of heat rolled out, not the cozy warmth of a hearth, but the dense, oppressive heat of a forge, the kind that reshapes stubborn metal. "Enter." The command held no particular emotion, yet brooked no disobedience. My legs, moving of their own volition, carried me into a chamber larger than my entire cottage. Thick furs blanketed the stone floor, and a bed of formidable scale dominated one wall, its posts fashioned from whole, bark-clad trunks. A fire roared in a hearth large enough for an entire tree, its light dancing across walls hung with maps of territories and racks of well-kept weapons. The Alpha Sovereign, Cadden, stood beside a table laden with sustenance. He had shed his ceremonial furs, revealing formidable shoulders beneath a simple linen shirt. Stripped of regalia, he seemed younger, yet no less formidable. "You lack the customary preparation," he observed, his eyes narrowing as they catalogued my plainness. "From which settlement do you hail?" "River Mist," I answered, surprised at the steadiness in my own voice. The summons gave us little time. His laugh was short, devoid of warmth. "Summons, is that the word they used?" He took a step closer, and I summoned every ounce of will to hold my ground. "What is your name?" "Ara." "Ara," he repeated, as if testing the flavor of the syllable. "Do you understand why you are here, Ara of River Mist? Our council exchanged my presence for the shield of your protection. And do you know what becomes of those chosen at this gathering?" The stories were common enough, whispered by women at the village well. Those selected became property, companions, bearers of heirs, ornaments to be discarded when novelty faded. Some lived gilded lives, others vanished from memory. "I understand the general expectation," I replied, fighting the tremor that threatened my words. Cadden began a slow circuit around me, his gaze a palpable weight. "I wonder if you do." He halted before me, close enough that I could feel the heat emanating from him. "Your village elders sent a missive with their offering. Do you know its contents?" I shook my head, confusion momentarily overshadowing dread. "It stated their tribute was flawed, that you harbor an affliction of the mind, rendering you unsuitable." His eyes bored into mine, searching. "They claim you witness visions, converse with specters none else can perceive." The blood drained from my face. The sight had been my most guarded secret, shared only with my grandmother, who had carried the same gift. Since her passing, I had grown less cautious, perhaps murmuring to the forest spirits where an ear could overhear, sketching old symbols in the dirt to honor the ancient guardians of the wood. "They sent you anticipating your failure," Cadden continued, his voice dropping. "To be rejected and returned in disgrace, fulfilling their obligation without sacrificing anyone they valued." Humiliation, hot and acrid, rose within me, followed swiftly by a clean, sharp anger. The council had always viewed me, the orphaned oddity at the forest's edge, with suspicion. But to send me as a deliberate slight to the sovereign himself, "I did not petition to be here," I said, a crack finally appearing in my composure. "Return me, keep me, exact whatever penalty their insult warrants, it is of no difference to me." Something flickered in his eyes, surprise perhaps at such directness from one in my position. Those of his stature were accustomed to bowed heads and whispered acquiescence, not steady gazes and plain speech. "There will be no penalty," he stated after a measured pause, "not for you. As for River Mist, we shall see." He turned, pouring dark wine into 2 goblets. "I have a proposition for you, Ara, a path to secure both your liberty and your village's safety." My heart clenched. What manner of proposition? "Remain in my chambers tonight," he said simply, offering one goblet. "If you stay until first light without seeking to flee, I will grant you your freedom. No permanent claim, no binding ceremony. You may return to Rivermist, and I will extend my protection to them despite their discourtesy." I stared, waiting for the trap to spring. "Merely stay the night, that is all." His laugh this time held a shade of genuine, if weary, amusement. "Not merely stay, little Omega. You will share the space, the bed, the night." Understanding dawned, bringing a flush to my cheeks. "And if I refuse, then you return to Rivermist at dawn, but my shield is withdrawn. I suspect neighboring territories would be eager to absorb such undefended lands. The choice was an illusion. My village, for all its flaws, was home to the innocent, the children, the elders, those who had no voice in the council's schemes. Without the sovereign's protection, they would be prey to raiders and rival clans whose mercies would make Cadden seem benevolent. "One night," I repeated carefully, "and then I am free, no mark, no ceremony." He gave a single, firm nod. "One night, your fortitude for your freedom." I reached for the proffered goblet. As my fingers brushed his, a startling jolt like static from a winter cloak passed between us. My breath hitched, his nostrils flared subtly, and I wondered if he could scent the fear on me, and something else, something beneath it I refused to name. "What now?" I asked, taking a small sip to ground myself. Cadden's gaze darkened as he watched the wine touch my lips. "Now we wait for nightfall, and then, Aura of Rivermist, we shall discover the true metal you are made of." Beyond the chamber window, the sun bled toward the horizon, staining the sky in violent hues of crimson and gold. In a handful of hours, I would either reclaim my destiny or see it forever altered in the bed of the Alpha Sovereign. A man who had chosen me for reasons I could not fathom, whose eyes held secrets as deep and dark as the coming night. I paced the length of the chamber, a restless orbit around its central hearth. Cadden observed from a heavy chair by the fire, his silent presence nonetheless filling the space, a stone distorting the stream of my anxiety. "Are you charting an escape?" he finally inquired, a thread of amusement in his tone. "The windows are a lethal drop, the door will be guarded, and I am unquestionably faster than you." I paused by the window, watching the last embers of daylight die on the distant mountains. "I am not planning an escape. I agreed to your terms." "Yet you move like a creature in a trap." "Perhaps because I am one," I replied, turning to face him. The wine had lent a dangerous looseness to my tongue, a boldness that overrode caution. To my surprise, no anger clouded his features. Instead, he leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his focus sharpening. "Tell me of these visions they condemn." My hand flew to the pendant beneath my dress. "They are nothing, village superstition. Lie to me again, Ara, and our accord is void." The threat hung, cold and sharp, in the air between us. I swallowed. No one had ever demanded the truth of it before. They only whispered, called me cursed, kept their children from the strange girl who conversed with the empty air. "I see echoes," I began, choosing the words with care. "Sometimes of what has been, sometimes of what may yet come, and sometimes," I hesitated, knowing the madness the words would paint, "sometimes I see presences others do not. Spirits that dwell in the deep woods, the laughing rivers, the ancient stones." I awaited the derisive laugh, the accusation of fabrication or insanity. It did not come. Instead, Cadden rose and approached with a slow, deliberate caution, as one would a skittish forest creature. "What form do these spirits take?" The question was so unexpected, I answered without artifice. "Like shadows woven with light, like the wind given conscious shape, they communicate without words and move through spaces that should not, by logic, exist." He stood before me now, near enough that I could see flecks of amber in the depths of his dark eyes. "And what do they tell you, these silent watchers?" "Warnings, mostly. Where the path is unsafe, which berries will heal and which will steal breath." I drew a steadying breath. 3 days passed, they whispered of men approaching my door. I did not heed them. A subtle shift occurred in his expression, a recognition, an unlocking of some private knowledge. Your grandmother carried the same gift. It was not a question, but I nodded. How did you know? The pendant you guard so closely. His gaze dropped to where my hand still pressed the silver through the fabric. May I see it? Reluctantly, I drew the chain over my head and offered it, the metal catching the firelight. He did not take it, merely leaned closer to study the engraving. His voice dropped to a murmur. A moonspeaker. I believed their line had faded generations ago. Moonspeaker. He straightened, his face once again an impassive mask. An ancient lineage, rare among our kind. There was an age when they were revered, not reviled. He gestured for me to reclaim the pendant. Your council is blind to the true nature of what they have sent. Before I could demand an explanation, a knock sounded. Cadden called entry, and a young woman slipped in, bearing a tray of replenishments and a steaming pitcher that filled the room with the scent of spiced cider. Your bath is prepared in the adjoining room, my king, she said, eyes downcast, and for your guest should she wish it. My thanks, Mira. When the door shut, he turned to me. You should eat, then refresh yourself, night advances. The reminder was a cold splash. I moved to the table, my actions more for occupation than hunger. What? I asked, catching his unusual expression as I selected a piece of dark bread. Most brought here refuse sustenance, whether from fear or from a lifetime of training to maintain a form pleasing to certain tastes. He gestured at the bounty. Eat what you need, you will require your strength. The implication warmed my cheeks, but I ate with deliberate purpose. He was not wrong. When I had finished, he led me to a door I had not noticed, revealing a smaller chamber aglow with oil lamps. Steam curled from a sunken copper bath large enough for two, its surface scattered with fragrant petals. Take the time you require, he said, stepping back. I will bathe after. I stood, awkwardly aware of my travel-worn state, tangled hair, the ghost of forest soil beneath the fine dress. Will you? I gestured vaguely, unable to voice the question. Understanding softened his gaze. I will wait beyond, call when you are finished. The door clicked shut, leaving me alone with the thunder of my own heart. I shed the ceremonial shift quickly, laying my grandmother's pendant carefully on a nearby stool. The water was a perfect embrace, and I sank into it with a sigh that trembled on the edge of a sob. For a fleeting moment, I allowed myself the fantasy of being elsewhere, but reality was insistent. As I washed, scrubbing away the grime of journey and dread with soap that smelled of lavender and pine, I forced myself to confront the coming hours. One night to endure, and then freedom. I had survived worse, the crushing loneliness after my parents' passing, the years of whispered ostracization, the gnawing hunger when the village would not trade with the touched girl. I could endure this. Emerging, I found a plush drying cloth and a robe of deep, twilight blue waiting. Not the flimsy offering gown, not some costume of submission, but a simple, warm garment that covered me from throat to ankle. I combed my hair with my fingers, letting it fall in damp waves, then donned the robe and fastened my pendant once more around my neck. I am finished, I called, my voice too small in the steamy quiet. The door opened immediately. Cadden entered, his gaze sweeping over me, noting I was sure how the damp fabric clung. Your turn, I said, moving to pass. His hand caught my arm, a firm but not painful anchor. I froze. Wait, he was close enough that his scent, pine, wood smoke, and something untamed enveloped me. My own latent instincts, long suppressed, stirred uneasily at his proximity, a silent urge to lower my eyes, to yield. I resisted, holding his gaze despite the tremor in my limbs. There is something you should understand before the night is fully upon us, he said, his voice low. I chose you for a reason, Ara, because I am this moonspeaker. That is a piece of it, but there is more. He released my arm, his fingers trailing lightly over my skin. When I entered that hall, I scented something I have sought my entire reign, something I had begun to fear was mere legend. A chill, unrelated to the damp, traced my spine. What did you scent? My fated counterpart, the words seemed to vibrate in the air between us. Fated pairs were the substance of ancient ballads, tales of souls destined across lifetimes. Most dismissed them as romantic fancies invented to sweeten the bitterness of political unions. I took a step back. That is not possible, is it not? He challenged, his eyes gleaming with a primal intensity. Then why did every alpha in that hall grow tense at your entrance? Why did I know precisely where you stood before my eyes found you? Why does your very essence call to me like nothing I have ever known? If that were true, I countered, my voice tight, why offer me freedom? Why not simply claim what you believe is yours? His expression darkened, because a true counterpart cannot be taken. Only accepted freely, and you, little Omega, are as untamed as the spirits you walk with. He stepped closer again, and I held my ground. I desire your allegiance, Ara, but I desire it given, not extracted. So this night is a test, I said, comprehension dawning. To see if I will submit. This night is an opportunity, he corrected, for us both to discover what truth lies between us. If you feel nothing by dawn, you walk away as promised, but if you feel even an echo of what I sensed. He left the thought hanging. I lifted my chin, and if I walk away regardless, something dangerous flickered in the depths of his gaze. Then I will honor my word, but know this, what exists between true counterparts does not fade with distance. It becomes an ache, a relentless pull that can consume from the inside. Is that a threat? It is a caution, he said, the words heavy, from one who has witnessed its truth. He stepped back, creating a space that felt suddenly charged. I will bathe now. Wait for me by the fire. As the door closed, I leaned against the wall, my legs unsteady. Fated counterpart. The concept was terrifying, not because I disbelieved, but because in a hidden, secret chamber of my soul, I feared he might be right. The spark at his touch, the acute awareness of his presence, the way my body responded to his scent despite my mind's protest, these were not ordinary reactions. I returned to the main chamber and stood before the fire, watching flames devour logs and trying to quiet the storm in my mind. Outside, night now reigned absolute, a tapestry of stars beyond the glass. Within the hour, the terms of our bargain would begin. But the stakes had shifted irrevocably. This was no longer merely about endurance. It was about confronting a bond that, if the old tales held truth, could tether me to this formidable stranger for a lifetime. The bathing chamber door opened. Cadden emerged wearing only loose linen trousers slung low on his hips. Water droplets gleamed on the planes of his chest and shoulders in the firelight. A topography of scars mapped his skin, a silent history of conflict and survival. "Are you afraid?" he asked, coming to stand beside me. I considered a lie, then discarded it. Yes, of me or of what you might feel. The question cut too close to the core of my conflict. Both, I admitted. He nodded as if my honesty satisfied him. Good, he gestured toward the formidable bed. Shall we begin our night, Ara of River Mist? The moment was upon me. My heart drummed against my ribs. One night to endure, one night to resist the inexplicable pull toward this man who claimed to be my destined match. One night to secure my freedom or to forfeit it forever. I moved toward the bed, each step feeling like a crossroads. Behind me I felt Cadden follow, a predator, patient and sure. As I reached the edge of the firs, his voice came, low and intimate, near my ear. "Remember, endure until dawn and you are free." His fingers brushed the hair from my neck, a touch that sent sparks cascading down my spine. "But first, let us see the strength you carry within." His touch lingered at the nape of my neck, a phantom pressure that set my pulse racing. I stood frozen, suspended between the instinct to flee and a bewildering urge to lean into the solid warmth of him. "Turn around." I obeyed, though not from submission. I needed to see his face to read the intention in those amber-flecked eyes. He stood close, the heat from his skin a tangible force. The scars I had glimpsed now told silent, violent stories across his torso, a history etched in flesh. Without conscious thought, my hand lifted toward a particularly savage-looking mark that ran from his collarbone to the lower edge of his ribs. He caught my wrist before contact, his grip firm but not cruel. "An inquisitive moonspeaker," he murmured, "forever reaching toward what others fear." "How came you by this one?" I asked, my voice barely audible. Something shadowed passed behind his eyes. "An assassination attempt 3 winters past. The would-be killer believed a blade wielded by an Omega would go unnoticed by an Alpha until it was too late. Was she correct?" "She," he corrected, "came closer than any other. I survived only because the poison on her blade had weakened with age." His thumb traced a slow circle on the inside of my wrist, a touch that sent tendrils of heat radiating up my arm. Since that day, I have learned to regard easy submission with a skepticism. The implication was clear. My resistance, my refusal to cower, was precisely what had drawn his attention in that hall of trained, perfumed offerings. "Is that the reason for this bargain?" I asked. "Because you do not trust what is given too readily." His lips curved, transforming the severe lines of his face into something unexpectedly approachable. "I offered because you looked ready to sink your teeth into the handler who dared touch you. Because your eyes held storm clouds even as your hands trembled." His hand slid to my waist, resting at the cinch of the robe, because true counterparts should meet as equals, not as conqueror and conquest. "We are not true counterparts," I insisted, though the words rang hollow in my own ears. "Then the night will prove it," he replied, his confidence unshaken. His fingers found the knot securing my robe. "May I?" The question, the request for permission, stole my breath. Alphas did not ask, they took, especially kings with Omegas in their chambers committed to a bargain. "Yes," I whispered, the sound swallowed by the crackle of the fire. He untied the knot with deliberate slowness, his gaze never leaving mine as the fabric fell open. Cool air whispered across my skin, raising gooseflesh. I fought the urge to cover myself, standing revealed before him with only my grandmother's pendant as a shield. Cadden's eyes darkened as his gaze traveled over me, his breathing growing perceptibly uneven. "Like moonlight given form," he murmured, his voice rough with a restraint I could feel vibrating in the air. Heat bloomed across my skin, a flush that traveled from my cheeks down my throat. No one had ever looked at me thus, as something precious, desirable, worthy of savoring. "Your turn," I said, the boldness of the words surprising us both. A brow arched, but he complied, loosening the drawstring of his trousers and letting them fall. He stood before me, unashamed and formidable, every inch the sovereign. My breath caught at the raw power of him, the lethal grace barely contained. Satisfied, he asked, a thread of amusement in the words. Intimidated, I admitted honestly. His laugh was a low, genuine sound. Honesty again, you continue to unravel my expectations. He reached for me, his hands settling on my waist. "We have the span of the night, there is no need for haste." He guided me onto the bed, the furs soft and cool against my skin. I expected him to cover me immediately to claim what the bargain had promised. Instead, he stretched out beside me, propped on one elbow, his free hand hovering just above my collarbone. "May I touch you?" I nodded, my voice lost. His fingers began a slow, deliberate exploration, tracing from my collarbone to my shoulder, then down the length of my arm, as if committing my geography to memory. "When I sensed you in that hall," he said, his voice a low vibration in the quiet room, "it was like finding a path in a wood I had known was lost, like returning to a hearth I had never known. That is only instinct," I argued weakly. "The drive to claim." He shook his head, his hand continuing its careful journey across my stomach, avoiding the places that already throbbed with a strange, urgent awareness. "I have been surrounded by Omegas since I took the throne, beautiful, willing, expertly trained. None have ever affected me thus." His scent enveloped me, pine, smoke, and something uniquely male, clouding my thoughts and making my head swim. My own omega nature, so long and fiercely suppressed, surged toward his alpha presence, recognizing something my conscious mind still fought to deny. What if this is merely physical? I whispered. Chemistry between two bodies. Cadden's hand paused at the curve of my hip. Then why do I sense the shape of your thoughts before you give them voice? Why did I know to have a blue robe prepared when I have never seen your face? Why does every primal instinct I possess roar that you belong here? His words sent a shiver through me that had nothing to do with chill. Tell me you feel nothing of it, Ara. Lie to me if you can. I could not lie. Not when his proximity made my skin feel aflame, not when his scent was an intoxicant, not when every fiber of my being strained toward him. In answer, I closed the distance between us, pressing my lips to his in a kiss born of desperate curiosity and a hunger I could no longer deny. For one suspended heartbeat, he was utterly still, as if shocked by my initiative. Then he responded with a fervor that stole my reason, his hand cradling the back of my head as he deepened the kiss. It was not gentle, it was a conflagration. A sound escaped me, part gasp, part moan, as my hands found the solid planes of his shoulders, my fingers digging into skin and muscle to pull him closer. He broke the kiss, both of us breathing as if we had run for miles. Do you believe me now? He asked, the words strained. I believe there is a force between us, I admitted. Whether it is fate or something else, I cannot say. A slow, triumphant smile touched his lips. Then allow me to provide further evidence. His mouth found mine again, this time with a deliberate intensity that dissolved the last remnants of my rational thought. His body shifted, covering mine, and the weight of him pressing me into the furs felt not like confinement, but like a homecoming, a terrifying, exhilarating rightness. His hands learned me with a boldness now, cupping the swell of my breast, his thumb brushing over a sensitive peak until I arched against him with a sharp gasp. Tell me what you wish for, he murmured against the column of my throat where his lips traced a burning path toward the frantic beat of my pulse. I do not know, I whispered, the truth laid bare. This landscape was foreign, my body's responses a torrent I could not navigate. Then allow me to guide you. What followed was a slow, meticulous unraveling. Cadden's hands and mouth were patient cartographers, charting territories of pleasure I had not known existed, drawing sounds from my lips that were entirely new. Each touch, each kiss seemed designed to dismantle my defenses, to prove this connection was more than mere flesh, and it was working. When his fingers finally slipped between my thighs, finding the slick, undeniable evidence of my desire, I cried out, my body jerking at the shock of sensation. So profoundly responsive, he murmured against my skin, so perfectly fashioned for this. Cadden, I gasped as his touch grew more specific, building a coil of tension deep within me, tightening toward a shattering point. Again, he commanded, his eyes capturing mine in the firelight. Say my name, Cadden. The name broke from me as his skillful touch pushed me toward a precipice I had never glimpsed. Something fiercely possessive flashed in his gaze. Mine, he growled, the control in his voice fraying at the edges. Say you are mine, Ara. The demand cleaved through the haze of building pleasure, a cold reminder of the stakes. Freedom versus surrender, my village's security versus my own autonomy. I turned my face away, unable to grant him the words, even as my body betrayed me, singing a chorus of submission to his every stroke. He did not press the demand. Instead, his movements became more focused, more relentless, driving me inexorably toward a peak I could not, and did not wish to, resist. When the climax broke over me, it was a tempest, wave after wave of blinding, shattering pleasure that tore a raw cry from my throat, his name a prayer upon it. As I lay trembling in the aftermath, breathless and boneless, he kissed me with a sudden, surprising tenderness, allowing me a moment to float back to myself. but I could feel the iron restraint in the tension of his muscles, in the hard press of his desire against my thigh. "The night is in its infancy," he whispered against my ear, "and I am far from finished with my exploration, little moonspeaker." The hours that followed blurred into a tapestry of sensation. Cadden was, by turns, devastatingly gentle and fiercely demanding. He learned what made me gasp, what made me plead, and he wielded that knowledge without mercy, bringing me to that trembling peak again and again until I was pliant and mindless beneath him. Only then, when I was adrift on a sea of spent pleasure, did he settle between my thighs, his body poised, his eyes holding a silent question. I nodded, beyond denial, beyond resistance to what my flesh, and perhaps something deeper, had already accepted. He joined us with a slow, careful possession, giving me time to adjust, his gaze never wavering from mine. The initial discomfort was brief, washed away by a shocking, profound sense of completion, as if a piece of myself, long missing, had clicked into place. "Cadden," I breathed, my hands clutching at the powerful muscles of his back as he began to move. "My aura," he responded, his voice raw with an emotion I had not anticipated from the sovereign. "My counterpart." This time I did not contradict him, could not. Not when every measured movement bound us tighter, not when our scents mingled into something new and intoxicating, not when the pleasure building between us felt like something sacred, something that transcended the physical. We found a rhythm that was ancient and instinctive, building towards something that felt larger than both of us. Cadden's control began to slip, his movements growing more urgent, more primal. His mouth found the sensitive junction of my neck and shoulder, his teeth grazing the skin where a claiming mark would forever brand me as his. Fear and a dark, desperate wanting warred within me. "No," I gasped, even as my body arched, offering more. "You vowed no claiming." A pained groan vibrated against my skin, but he lifted his head, pressing his forehead to mine instead, our breaths mingling. "I know my vow," he gritted out, "but by the old gods, Ara, you make a man forget his own name." The honesty in his struggle, this powerful king fighting his most base instincts to honor a promise to me, touched a hidden, vulnerable place in my soul. Our pace quickened, the world narrowing to the point where our bodies joined, the pleasure coiling impossibly tight. "Let it take you," Cadden urged, his voice strained at the edges. "Let go for me, Ara." I did. I shattered around him with a cry that was both surrender and victory. He followed moments after, his powerful form tensing above me, my name a broken benediction on his lips. Afterward, we lay tangled, the sweat cooling on our skin, the roar of blood in our ears gradually subsiding. Cadden's weight was a comfort, not a burden. I made no move to dislodge him. "Do you believe me now?" he asked, his voice soft in the quiet. I did not answer immediately, taking inventory. What had passed between us was undeniable in its power, but did it mean we were fated? Did it mean I should trade my hard-won independence for the title of queen, of mate? "I believe there is a power between us," I admitted carefully, "but I require time to understand its nature." He rolled to his side, keeping one arm draped possessively across my waist. "Dawn is still hours distant. No decisions are required tonight." I traced the strong line of his jaw, studying the face that had been so cold in the great hall, now softened by satiation and something that looked dangerously like tenderness. "Tell me of your mother," I said, the question emerging unbidden. Surprise flickered. "My mother, was she a moonspeaker?" "No, but she knew the old lore. She was the one who taught me the stories, the true histories, before politics made omegas into commodities and alphas into tyrants." His finger drew idle patterns on my hip. "She would have admired you." "Would have." A shadow crossed his features. "She died when I was 14, the same night my father was assassinated." The pieces aligned, his distrust, his scars, the weight of a crown donned too young. "I am sorry," I said, the words inadequate. He acknowledged them with a nod. "And your parents, you spoke of your grandmother, but not of them." A fever took them both 10 winters past. My grandmother raised me after, taught me what she could of her sight before she too passed 3 years ago, leaving you alone, unprotected. I bristled. I learned to protect myself, to live with the whispers, the isolation. His eyes softened. I implied no weakness. Quite the opposite, you endured where others would have fractured. His hand rose to cup my cheek. It is one of the countless reasons you would be worthy to stand as queen. The declaration jarred me back to reality. I have not agreed to that. Not yet, he conceded, his confidence undimmed. But the night is only half spent. Before I could form a retort, his mouth claimed mine again, and thought dissolved once more into sensation. As his hands rekindled the fire in my blood, I wondered if I was resisting a tide that had already swept me out to sea. Would Dawn find me not merely physically conquered, but willingly, irrevocably surrendered to this alpha who offered not subjugation, but partnership? And for the first time, the prospect did not fill me with dread, but with a dangerous, thrilling seed of hope. The first pallid light of dawn, the color of wood ash, seeped through the high windows, patiently reclaiming the chamber from shadow. I lay awake, watching it trace the strong lines of Cadden's sleeping face. In repose, the Alpha Sovereign looked younger, the stern lines of authority smoothed away, his dark lashes delicate against his skin. One arm remained draped across my waist, a possessive anchor even in the depths of sleep. The night had been a revolution. After our second joining, we had spoken for hours of his kingdom's burdens, of Rivermist's simple struggles, of the spirits I could perceive, and the legends preserved in his family's archives. Then passion would rise again, a tide we could not resist until exhaustion finally pulled us under. Now, as the gray light heralded the conclusion of our bargain, I faced the choice I had avoided in the haze of pleasure and whispered confidences. Stay or go. Claim the freedom I had bargained for, or surrender to the bond that had become undeniable. With careful slowness, I slipped from beneath his arm, retrieving the blue robe from where it had fallen. My body ached with a pleasant soreness, a map of his attention written in faint bruises and tender places. Securing the robe, I moved to the window, gazing out at the formidable fortress walls and beyond them the distant, dark smudge of forest that eventually led home. But what awaited in Rivermist? Suspicion, isolation, the council's fury when they learned their intended insult had failed. I would return no more welcome than when I left, yet it would be freedom, the freedom I had earned. Freedom to choose my own path, beholden to no alpha, no matter how compelling. You remain. Cadden's voice, rough with sleep, startled me. I turned to find him sitting up, the furs pooled at his waist, his eyes intently upon me. Dawn has only just broken, I replied, gesturing to the window. Our agreement is fulfilled. I endured the night. So you did. His expression was carefully neutral, but I sensed the tension thrumming beneath his calm. And more than merely endured, I think. Heat warmed my cheeks at the memory of my own eager participation, of how I had taken initiative, explored his body with the same thorough curiosity he had shown mine. The bargain stands, he continued when I did not respond. You are free to return to Rivermist. My protection for your village is guaranteed. I studied him, trying to reconcile this man of honor with the imposing, cold figure from the hall. Just like that, after all you spoke of fated bonds, of the agony of separation, something raw flashed in his eyes, pain or resignation. I keep my word, Ara, always. He rose from the bed, magnificently unconcerned with his nakedness, and reached for his discarded trousers. I will have an escort prepared. You will want to depart before the court stirs and the gossip begins. As he dressed, I remained by the window, torn. He was giving me precisely what I had wanted, what I had bargained my presence for. Yet the thought of walking away from him, of never again knowing his touch or seeing that rare, transformative smile, created an ache in my chest I had not anticipated. What if I chose to stay? The question escaped, stark and quiet, before I could reconsider. Cadden went utterly still, his back to me as he fastened his trousers. "Do not toy with me, little Omega," he said, his voice dangerously soft. "Not in this." "I am not toying," I replied, taking a step toward him. "I am inquiring what would transpire if I chose to remain." He turned slowly, his expression guarded, but his eyes burning with a hope I now recognized. "If you stayed, you would be my queen, my equal counterpart in all things." Equal. I repeated, skepticism coloring the word. "An Omega as equal to the Alpha Sovereign? Your court would never accept it." "The court would learn," he said, closing the distance between us, his hands coming to rest lightly on my shoulders. "But I will not deceive you, Ara. The path would not be smooth, there would be resistance, challenges to your standing, perhaps even danger, like the Omega who gave me this." He gestured to the scar on his chest. "Precisely," I said, "there are those who believe our roles are fixed, immutable. They would see me as a threat to the natural order." I weighed this, balancing the danger against the promise of belonging, of a purpose beyond mere survival. "And my gifts, the visions, the spirits." "The moonspeakers of old were advisors to sovereigns," Cadden said, his thumbs tracing small circles on my collarbone. "Bridges between the world of form and the realm of spirit. Your gifts would be honored, not hidden, utilized for the benefit of the kingdom, not feared as witchcraft." The prospect was deeply seductive, to be valued for the very thing that had made me an outcast. "And us," I asked, my voice barely a whisper, "what would become of us beyond the politics and the position?" Something profound softened in his gaze. "We would be what we are meant to be, partners, allies." His hand moved to rest, palm flat against my stomach, a gesture of startling intimacy. "In time, perhaps parents to heirs who might carry both our strengths forward." The image his words conjured, children with his resilience and my sight, raised not in fear or secrecy but in purpose, sent an unexpected, piercing yearning through me. In Rivermist, children had seemed an impossibility. "I do not know how to be a queen," I admitted, giving voice to the fear that underpinned all others. "And I did not know how to be a king when my father's crown was placed upon my head," he replied. "We learn, we adapt. We grow into the roles destiny provides." His hands framed my face. "But know this, Ara of Rivermist, I want you for far more than a title or a womb or even your gifts. I want you for the fire that burns in you. The courage that made you meet my gaze when others cast theirs down. The honesty that refuses flattery or false deference." His words wrapped around my heart, a gentle, inescapable pressure. This was what I had never dared hope for, not merely desire or protection, but true recognition. To be seen fully for all that I was. "I am afraid," I confessed, leaning into his touch despite myself. "Of what?" "Of losing myself, of becoming merely an extension of your will, your power." I swallowed hard. "I have fought too long for my own ground to surrender it, even for this connection." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "You believe accepting the bond means surrendering yourself, does it not? Is that not what being claimed signifies, becoming property?" Cadden shook his head, his expression turning fierce. "Not between true counterparts, never between us." He took my hands in his. "Come, there is something you must see." Curious despite the turmoil within me, I allowed Cadden to lead me to a heavy, iron-bound door on the chamber's far side. It opened not to another room, but to a narrow, spiral staircase carved into the living stone of the keep itself. "Where does this lead?" I asked as he took a lamp from a sconce. "To the reason I believe what I believe," he replied, his tone solemn. We ascended in single file, the worn steps whispering beneath our feet. After a long, winding climb, we emerged into a circular chamber at the summit of a tower. Unlike the opulent rooms below, this space was austere, its stone walls bare save for shelves laden with ancient books and scrolls whose leather bindings were cracked with age. In the center of the room, on a simple pedestal of gray stone, rested a single object, a crystal orb the size of two clenched fists, its interior clouded with what appeared to be slow-swirling mist. "What is this place?" I whispered, feeling a strange, resonant energy humming in the air, raising the fine hairs on my arms. "The seer's chamber," Cadden answered, placing the lamp on a nearby table. "It has existed since the first stone of this fortress was laid. Legend says it was fashioned by the first Alpha Sovereign and his mate, a moonspeaker like you." I approached the pedestal slowly, drawn by the orb's subtle, pulsing light. "And this, the Heart of Sight. A relic from the age when alphas and omegas ruled as partners before power corrupted the balance." He stood beside me, watching my reaction closely. "It responds only to those with the true gift, the moonspeaker's sight." As if summoned by his words, the mist within the crystal began to swirl more rapidly, colors bleeding into the gray, echoes of sapphire, silver, threads of gold. "It reacts to you," Cadden said softly. "In 3 generations of my line, it has never stirred thus." I stared, transfixed by the patterns forming and dissolving within the depths. "What is its purpose?" The old texts say it amplifies a moonspeaker's gifts, allows clearer sight, deeper communion with the spirit realm, a guide for the kingdom through seen and unseen perils. His voice lowered. "It is also written that when touched by fated counterparts, one an alpha of royal blood, one a moonspeaker, it reveals the path ahead. The implications settled between us. You wish for us to touch it, together." He nodded, his expression grave. "If nothing occurs, you can walk away knowing our connection is mere attraction, powerful but mundane. But if it responds," he left the possibility hanging, vast and silent. I hesitated, poised on a knife's edge. If I touched it and nothing happened, I could depart with certainty. But if it confirmed his belief, could I still walk away? What if I still choose to leave, even if it shows we are fated? A flicker of pain crossed his features, quickly mastered. "Then I would honor your choice as vowed. But I would hope you might consider an alternative, not an immediate claiming, but a courtship. Time to know one another beyond a single night. Time for you to see that being my counterpart would not mean losing yourself, but finding a partner who values all that you are." His offer was a revelation, a concession I had not thought an alpha king capable of making. Not immediate surrender, but choice, not possession, but partnership. "Very well," I agreed, my heart hammering against my ribs. "We will touch it together." Cadden positioned himself opposite me, the pedestal between us. "Place your hand upon it when you are ready. I will mirror you." Taking a steadying breath, I reached out, my fingers hovering just above the cool crystal surface. Across from me, Cadden did the same, his eyes never leaving mine. In them I saw not the sovereign, but the man, vulnerable, hopeful, braced for rejection. "Together," I whispered, we pressed our palms to the crystal in unison. Light, pure and blinding, exploded from the orb's core. The light was not mere illumination, it was a flood that poured directly into my mind, bypassing my eyes. Behind closed lids, visions cascaded in a rapid, silent torrent. I saw Cadden and I standing side by side on a dais, our hands clasped before a gathered court of mixed expressions, some curious, some hostile, some hopeful. The weight of a delicate silver circlet rested upon my brow. I saw us bent together over an enormous, parchment-strewn table in a room lined with books, heads close in consultation, searching for an answer to some looming, shadowed threat. I saw my own body, curved with the promise of new life, Cadden's hands resting protectively over the swell, his face alight with an awe I had never witnessed. I saw us years hence, silver threading our hair, surrounded by children and grandchildren whose eyes held echoes of both his strength and my sight. A legacy not of domination, but of balanced wisdom, and woven through every fleeting scene was an undeniable, profound sense of rightness. Not of submission or dominance, but of perfect counterbalance. Two halves of a single whole, each supporting the other's strength, each guarding the other's vulnerability. As the light faded, draining back into the orb until it was merely a crystal filled with gently swirling mist once more, I could open my eyes. I found Cadden staring at me with naked wonder, with hope, with a vulnerability that stole my breath. "You saw," he said. It was not a question. I nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in my throat. The visions had been unequivocal. We were fated, not in the simplistic way of ballads, but in the ancient, profound way the orb had shown, a partnership destined to restore a balance long forgotten. "I cannot be a traditional Omega Queen," I said, finding my voice at last. "I will not be silent or merely decorative or live behind a veil of pretense." "I would never ask that of you," he replied, his hand still on the orb, still connected to mine through the cool crystal. "I require a partner, Ara, not a portrait. Someone who will challenge me when I am mistaken, stand with me when I am right, and face the future at my side." He removed his hand and came around the pedestal, taking mine in his. "There will be opposition. I will not sugar that truth. From the court, from traditionalists." His smile then was the one I recognized, the predator's smile, reminding me that for all his gentleness with me, he was a king who had fought to hold his throne. "Let them oppose us. Together, we will show them what true balance can achieve. What this kingdom can become when ancient wisdom walks hand in hand with newfound strength." The pendant at my throat warmed as if my grandmother's spirit approved of this path. I remembered her final words, "Your spirit is the one thing they cannot truly chain unless you hand them the key." But this did not feel like handing over a key. It felt like finding the lock it had always been meant to open. "I will not return to River Mist," I said, the decision settling into my bones with a calm certainty, "not to stay. But I would visit to gather my few belongings, to speak with the few who showed me kindness." A pure, unguarded joy blazed in Cadden's eyes. "You will stay, you will be my counterpart, my queen." "I will stay," I confirmed, "not because you have conquered me. Not because you have claimed me, but because I choose this path, I choose you with open eyes." He gathered me into his arms then, his embrace fierce with a gentleness that belied his strength. "My Ara," he murmured into my hair, "my moonspeaker, my queen." I leaned into him, feeling for the first time in my life the profound rightness of belonging without the fear of dissolution. "My Cadden," I replied, lifting my face to his, "my king, my counterpart." When his lips met mine, it was a sealing of vows, a commencement rather than a conclusion. I had entered his chamber as a sacrificial offering, expecting to endure a night of submission to buy my freedom. Instead, I had discovered a partnership I had never dared dream existed. A future where my strangeness was not a curse, but a sacred gift, where the very traits that had made me an outcast rendered me indispensable. Later, as we descended the spiral stairs hand in hand, I glanced back at the crystal orb, now glowing with a soft, inner luminescence in the strengthening dawn. It had shown me more than visions of a shared future. It had shown me the truth I had been fighting since Cadden's gaze first found mine in the great hall, that sometimes true freedom is not found in solitude, but in the courage to join your spirit to another's and walk a destined path together. "What occupies your thoughts?" Cadden asked as we reached the bottom. I smiled up at him, the last shadows of fear retreating. "That I did not merely endure the night in your bed, Alpha King. I discovered my destiny there." His answering smile was like the sun breaking through a long winter. "And I discovered mine in the Omega, who dared to meet my gaze when all others looked away." He lifted my hand, pressing a kiss to my knuckles. "Welcome home, my queen. Home, not a place but a person, not a surrender but a choice." As Cadden led me back to the royal chambers where we would begin the arduous, glorious work of reshaping an ancient kingdom, I felt my grandmother's pendant warm against my skin, a reminder of where I had come from and a blessing for where I was now determined to go. The night I had agreed to endure had ended, the life I had chosen was just beginning, and for the first time in my memory, I looked toward the future not with fear, but with a steady, fearless heart. For whatever was to come, we would face it together. The world below the tower was waking. Sounds of the fortress, clanging from the smithy, distant drills of guards, the murmur of a stirring court, filtered up as Cadden led me back to his chambers. The hand holding mine was firm, a tether to the new reality I had chosen. "The court will convene at midday," he said, his voice shifting into the measured tone of a ruler. "Your introduction cannot wait. Secrecy would breed worse rumors than the truth." A flutter of anxiety, distinct from the earlier fear, took wing in my chest. "What is the truth you will tell them?" "The truth," he stopped, turning to face me in the dim corridor, "that the Moonspeaker lineage, long thought extinct, has returned, that the heart of sight has awakened to your touch, and that you have consented to a courtship with the intention of standing as my queen and counterpart." His thumb stroked my knuckles. "The specifics of the orb's visions are for us alone. Let them see the result, not the prophecy." It was a shield, and I was grateful for it. To be declared a fated mate based on a legend would make me a target. To be declared a political ally with a rare, useful skill made me a piece on the board, albeit a strange one. Safer, if only slightly. Back in his chamber, a transformation had occurred. The evidence of our night had been discreetly erased by unseen hands. Now the room held two new arrivals, a senior woman with a kind, lined face and sharp eyes, and a girl about my age holding a bundle of rich fabrics. "Mara," Cadden said, nodding to the older woman, "my late mother's most trusted attendant. She will guide you in the ways of the court as much as you wish to learn them, and this is Alara, who will serve as your handmaiden." Mara's gaze was assessing but not unkind. She dipped into a curtsy, deeper than was perhaps necessary. "My lady. We have much to discuss and little time." Alara simply stared, wide-eyed, clutching the fabrics, a gown of deep emerald velvet and a cloak trimmed with silver-gray fur. Cadden released my hand. "I must prepare as well. Mara will see you to the Hall of Antlers when the sun touches its zenith." He paused, his gaze holding mine. "Remember, you are not on trial, you are being presented. The distinction is everything." With that, he was gone, leaving me with the two strangers. "Come, child," Mara said, her voice brisk. "The bath is drawn again, you must be refreshed. Then we will talk while Alara tends to your hair." The next hours passed in a blur of scented water, delicate pastries brought on a tray, and Mara's steady stream of information. She named the key players of the court: Lord Thanric, the stern master of arms who valued tradition above all; Lady Yvain, a widowed alpha of a southern territory whose loyalty was pragmatic; Cadden's younger cousin, Thuron, whose ambition was a poorly kept secret. "They will test you," Mara said, watching as Alara began to work on my hair, brushing it until it shone like pale honey. Some with blatant disrespect, others with honeyed words hiding poison. "Your greatest shield will be the king's obvious favor. Your greatest weapon," she added, leaning forward, "will be your own composure. Do not react to petty insults. Do not try to be one of them. You cannot win that game. Be precisely what you are, something new." Alara braided sections of my hair, weaving them into an elegant, intricate crown that left the rest flowing down my back, a style both regal and untamed. When she held up the emerald gown, I balked. "It's too fine, it's a costume." "It is armor," Mara corrected gently. "In this place, perception is the first battlefield. You will wear the colors of the sovereign's house. You will wear the silver, the metal of the moon. You are announcing your allegiance and your nature without saying a word." Reluctantly, I submitted. The velvet was softer than I expected, the fur at the cloak's collar whisper-soft against my neck. My grandmother's pendant lay prominently over the gown's high neckline. As a final touch, Mara produced a thin silver circlet, delicate as a woven breath. "This was his mother's," she said quietly. "He asked that you wear it." The weight of it on my brow was negligible, but its significance was immense. I was being dressed for a role I had not studied, armed with symbols I barely understood. When the sun reached its peak, Mara led me through the labyrinthine corridors. The whispers began the moment we left the royal wing. Courtiers in silks and furs paused their conversations, their eyes tracking me with a mixture of shock, curiosity, and open disdain. I held my head as Mara had instructed, my gaze fixed on some distant point ahead, seeing them only as blurred shapes in my peripheral vision, like the indistinct forms of the forest spirits. The Hall of Antlers was vast, its vaulted ceiling supported by columns carved like ancient trees. Heads of great stags adorned the walls, and a throne of dark wood and worn leather sat upon a dais at the far end. Cadden was already there, standing before the throne rather than seated upon it. He wore his formal furs and a simple, dark crown. He looked every inch the king, but his eyes sought mine as I entered, and the slight softening of his expression was my anchor. The hall fell silent as I walked the long central aisle. 100 pairs of eyes felt like a physical pressure. I focused on the feel of the pendant against my chest, on the memory of the crystal light. I reached the dais. Cadden did not offer his hand, another deliberate choice Mara had explained. We were not yet formally bound. Instead, he gave a slight, formal nod of acknowledgement. "Lords and ladies of the court," his voice rang out, clear and commanding, "I present to you Ara of River Mist of the Moonspeaker lineage. The heart of sight, silent for 3 generations, has awakened to her presence. She has consented to remain at court to share her insight for the benefit of the realm." A murmur rippled through the crowd, sharp and buzzing. A man with a hawkish nose and close-cropped gray beard stepped forward. "Lord Thanric, my king, the Moonspeakers are myth. And an Omega presented in such a manner, it is without precedent. The traditions of the claiming are clear." "The traditions were served," Cadden replied, his tone cooling. "She was chosen, she remained. The terms of that night are between the chosen and their sovereign. They are not subject to the court's review." His gaze swept the room, daring challenge. "The precedent being set is one of utility. We face threats that do not always wear the face of an enemy army. Old wisdom has returned to us. It would be the height of folly to scorn it because it arrives in an unexpected form. What wisdom can she offer?" A woman's voice, sharp and clear. "Lady Yvain." Her expression was neutral, her question pointed. "Can she scry the movements of the Red Fang clan in the eastern passes? Can she tell us if the harvest in the southern valleys will fail?" All eyes swung to me. This was the first test. Cadden remained silent, letting me stand or fall. I took a slow breath, calling on the stillness I found in the deep woods. "My lady," I said, my voice carrying better than I'd hoped in the vast space, "the spirits do not speak in troop counts or bushels, they speak in currents, in warnings of imbalance. They might show a rockfall on a pass or the blight in a root before it surfaces. The translation, that is the work of the Moonspeaker, and of the council who knows the land." I met her gaze. "I cannot give you a number. I might, if the spirits will it, give you a place to look." A pause. Lady Yvain's lips pursed, not in disapproval but in consideration. It was not a triumphant answer, but it was an honest one. It seemed to satisfy her for now. The questions continued, some curious, some hostile. Through it all I kept my answers short, truthful, and rooted in the limited scope Mara and I had hastily defined. I was a seer, not a general, an advisor, not a ruler, Cadden's counterpart in potential, not yet in power. Finally, the audience was over. Cadden announced a feast in 3 days' time to properly welcome our rare guest, a clear command to the court to adjust their attitudes. As the courtiers began to disperse, buzzing with new gossip, a young man with Cadden's dark hair but a smoother, less hardened face approached the dais. "Thuron, cousin," he said, his smile bright but not quite reaching his eyes. He turned the smile on me. "My lady, a fascinating development. The castle has been dreadfully dull. You promised to liven things up considerably." His tone was light, but the words felt layered. Thuron, Cadden acknowledged, his own tone carefully neutral. Ara will be residing in the Sunstone Chambers. See that her comfort is prioritized. Of course. Thuron bowed slightly, anything for the future queen. He said it just loudly enough for the lingering courtiers to hear, a spark tossed into dry tinder before melting away into the crowd. Cadden's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He finally offered me his arm. You did well, he said quietly as we walked from the hall. The first skirmish is past. But as we exited into the corridor, a strange sensation washed over me, a sudden chill, a whisper at the edge of hearing that was not sound. I stumbled slightly. Cadden's grip tightened. Ara, I looked back at the great doors of the Hall of Antlers. For a fleeting second, the antlers on the walls seemed not like trophies, but like a forest of dead, accusatory branches. And among the lingering crowd, I thought I saw a figure, shrouded in gray, watching me with eyes that held no light at all. Then the crowd shifted and the figure was gone. It's nothing, I said, my voice less steady than before. A shadow, just a shadow. But the echo of the vision from the orb, the two of us searching over parchments for a hidden threat, flashed behind my eyes. The path ahead was chosen, but it was already strewn with unseen stones. The Sunstone Chambers were not part of the royal wing. They were a suite of rooms in an older part of the fortress, named for the way the morning light struck the peculiar, honey-colored veins in the stone. It was a clear statement. I was honored but separate, not yet sharing the king's private space. The rooms were airy and simply furnished with elegant, sturdy pieces. A main sitting room held a hearth, shelves already stocked with a few books and scrolls, and a large window overlooking a walled garden below. Two smaller rooms branched off, a bedchamber and a private bathing alcove. It was more space than I had ever inhabited. Ilara flitted about, unpacking the small trunk of my belongings that had been fetched from Rivermist, a few plain dresses, my herb-drying tools, a carved wooden box containing my grandmother's few remaining notes. Their homely presence in the refined room was a comfort. Mara stayed, supervising. "This is your sanctuary," she said. "Here you may be yourself. The court does not enter unless invited. Only the king, myself, Ilara, and the guards he will post have access." Guards. "For your protection, my lady. The king's favor is also a beacon for envy, and not all are pleased with the disruption you represent." Her meaning was clear. The shadowy figure in the hall, real or imagined, lingered in my mind. Cadden visited as evening fell. He had changed from his formal wear into simpler clothes, but the crown was gone, replaced by a look of weary tension. He dismissed Mara and Ilara with a nod. "How do you find your rooms?" he asked, pacing to the window. "They are beautiful, more than I need." "They are what is appropriate." He turned, his gaze searching my face. "You are pale." The audience took its toll. It was a gauntlet, but I survived. I hesitated. Cadden in the hall after, I saw something, a feeling more than a sight. A presence that felt cold, malicious. He was instantly alert, the weariness replaced by sharp focus. Describe it: a figure in gray, watching, and the feeling like the air before a lightning strike, but wrong. I shook my head, frustrated. It was gone in a blink. "It could have been my nerves." "Your gifts do not stem from nerves," he said firmly. He came to stand before me. "You are a moonspeaker in a den of wolves who have forgotten what wolves once were. Some fear the old power, others covet it. We must assume the vision was a warning." He took my hands. "This is part of the burden. Your sight may show us enemies hidden in plain sight. We must learn to trust it, and you must learn to interpret its warnings without being paralyzed by them." His belief was unwavering, a fortress against my own doubt. "How do I do that?" "You begin by resting. The feast in 3 days is the next trial. It will be less formal, more social, and in some ways more dangerous. Smiles hide daggers better than scowls do." He lifted a hand and gently touched the silver circlet on my brow. "You wore it. Mara said it was your mother's." "It was. She would be glad to know its purpose." He let his hand fall. I will have a guard outside your door at all times, a man I trust with my life. His name is Rylan, you may trust him with yours. The next 2 days were a strange interlude. By day, Mara was my tutor, drilling me on court etiquette, genealogy, and the complex web of alliances and grudges that formed the kingdom's politics. It was a dry, tedious history of slights and marriages, but I absorbed it, understanding it was another map to navigate this foreign terrain. In the quieter moments, I explored the walled garden from my window. It was winter bare, but the structure of it, the herb beds, the stone bench beneath a dormant climbing rose, spoke of a place meant for contemplation. I felt the faint, sleeping whispers of the plants there, a familiar comfort. I also explored the limits of my sight within the stone walls. The spirits of a fortress were different from forest spirits, older, heavier, imbued with memories of stone and siege and blood. They were less communicative, more like echoes trapped in mortar. But sometimes, standing in a certain corridor or touching a particular worn stone, I would get a flash, a glimpse of a laughing woman in an outdated gown, the clang of swords long stilled, a whispered secret. The castle was a living library of echoes. Cadden visited each evening. Our time was not like the fever dream of our first night, it was quieter, we talked. He shared the burdens of kingship, the drought worrying the south, the posturing of the Red Fang clan Lady Yvain had mentioned, the constant pressure to marry and produce an heir to solidify his line. "And now they will say I am bewitched," he said once, a wry twist to his mouth, "that a moonspeaker has clouded my judgment with moon magic. Are you?" I asked, only half teasing. He looked at me, the firelight dancing in his eyes. "If being bewitched means seeing a future I actually desire for the first time in my life, then yes, gladly." On the third morning, a different kind of lesson arrived. Lord Thanric himself, stiff and formal, came to the Sunstone Chambers to discuss matters of security pertinent to your unique position. It was a thinly veiled inspection. He asked pointed questions about river mist, about my grandmother, about the exact nature of my communion. I answered with careful vagueness, guided by Mara's earlier coaching. He watched me like a hawk watching a mouse in a field. "The king places great faith in old legends," he said finally, standing to leave. "Faith is a noble quality in a man. But a king requires steel and certainty. I hope, for all our sakes, my lady, that your visions provide it." The warning was clear. After he left, I felt drained. The relentless pressure to prove myself, to justify my existence here, was a constant weight. I retreated to the garden, needing space from stone and suspicion. The winter air was knife-sharp. I sat on the cold stone bench, my cloak wrapped tightly around me, and simply breathed. I reached out with that inner sense, not seeking the castle's heavy echoes, but the fainter, simpler whispers of the sleeping earth, the patient trees beyond the wall. A presence, familiar and warm, brushed against my awareness. Not a spirit. Cadden. I opened my eyes. He was standing at the garden entrance, watching me. He approached slowly. "Mara said you received a visit from Thanric. He is not my supporter. He is no one's supporter but the kingdom's as he sees it. His loyalty is to an ideal of stability, not to a person. Convince him you are part of that stability, and he will be your strongest ally. Fail too, and he will be an immovable obstacle." He sat beside me. "You are seeking the spirits here." "I am seeking silence, the kind that isn't full of whispering courtiers." He smiled faintly, "a rare commodity." He was quiet for a moment. "The feast is tonight. It will be a spectacle, music, dancing, endless toasts. You are not required to dance if you do not wish. But you will be watched every moment." I feel like a seedling transplanted onto a cliff face, I confessed. "The wind never stops." He took my hand, his grip solid and real. "Then grow roots of iron, Ara, grow them deep into this stone. This is your place now, our place, and we will weather any storm together." His words were a balm. As we sat in the quiet, winter-still garden, the pendant warm between us, I felt a flicker of the certainty I had seen in the orb's light. This was the path, the gauntlet, the suspicion, the Grey Watcher, they were all part of it. The feast awaited, let them watch. I would not just endure it, I would learn to walk through it. The great hall was transformed. Where before there had been austere space and judging silence, now there was a blaze of light from hundreds of candles and torches. Long tables groaned under platters of roasted meats, steaming pies, mountains of winter vegetables, and cascades of fruits preserved from autumn. The air was thick with the smells of food, spiced wine, perfume, and smoke. I entered on Cadden's arm as protocol demanded for the guest of honor. The emerald gown felt less like armor tonight and more like a second skin, a part of the role I was determined to play. The silver circlet was a familiar weight. A hush fell, then was quickly swallowed by the resumption of noise, louder now, more forced. Every face was turned toward us, every smile a careful performance. I kept my expression serene, a slight, polite curve to my lips that Mara had practiced with me. We were seated at the high table, Cadden in the center, me to his right. Lady Yvain was to his left, Lord Thanric beside her. Thuron was further down, surrounded by a group of younger, laughing nobles. The feast began. Servants poured wine, minstrels played a lively tune from a gallery above. Cadden engaged Lady Yvain in talk of the southern harvest. I was left to navigate a conversation with Lord Thanric, who sat stiffly to my right. "Your chambers are adequate, my lady?" he asked, cutting his meat with precise movements. "Quite comfortable, thank you, my lord. The garden is a particular solace. Gardening is a gentle pursuit." He took a sip of wine. "The king tells me you have been studying our history, a prudent use of your time. It is difficult to understand the present without some knowledge of what shaped it," I replied, repeating a phrase Mara had taught me. He gave a non-committal grunt. "Indeed, history teaches us the dangers of disruption, the value of orderly succession." His eyes flicked briefly to Thuron, laughing down the table, then back to his plate. The message was clear. My presence was a disruption to the orderly succession of a traditional alpha queen. Courses came and went. Toasts were made to the king's health, to the kingdom's prosperity, to a fruitful winter. Then Thuron stood, goblet in hand, a charming smile on his face. A toast. He called and the hall quieted. "To our most fascinating new guest, to the Lady Ara, whose very presence reminds us that our kingdom is built on both strength." He nodded to Cadden and mystery. He raised his glass to me. "May the moon always favor you, and may your visions bring us only good fortune." It was perfectly phrased to sound benevolent, yet it highlighted my otherness, my connection to mystery over concrete power. The court drank, many with curious eyes on me. I raised my own glass, dipped my head in acknowledgement, and took a small sip, my smile never wavering. As the musicians struck up a dance tune, the atmosphere shifted. Courtiers began to mingle, to drift toward the cleared space in the center of the hall. Cadden leaned close. "You do not have to," but I had seen the challenge in Thuron's eyes, the expectation in the court's gaze. To hide would be seen as weakness, as confirmation that I was unfit for this world. "I would like to," I said, surprising myself. He searched my face, then nodded. He led me to the floor. It was a formal, processional dance, one Mara had drilled into me just that afternoon. The steps were simple, a pattern of advance and retreat, of joining and parting hands. My focus narrowed to the music, to Cadden's guiding presence, to the placement of my feet. The world became a swirl of color and sound around our island of concentration. We moved well together. There was a natural synchronicity to our steps, as if the dance was merely an extension of the connection we had forged. When the dance ended and the court applauded politely, I felt a flush of genuine accomplishment, not just relief. As Cadden was drawn into conversation with a group of older lords, I found myself momentarily alone at the edge of the dance floor. That was when Lady Yvain approached. You dance with more grace than I expected for one raised in a forest cottage, she said, her tone not unkind, merely observational. All dances have their patterns, my lady, one simply has to learn the steps. A faint smile touched her lips, a pragmatic answer. Tell me, do your spirits have an opinion on Lord Thuron's rather enthusiastic toast? The question was a trap, but a more interesting one than most. Spirits rarely concern themselves with the words of men unless those words carry the weight of true intent. They listened to the heart, not the tongue. She regarded me for a long moment, a wise distinction, many in this hall have forgotten it. She glanced toward Thuron, who was now dancing with a blushing young Omega, his smile brilliant and empty. A word of advice, child. The greatest threats here are not the ones who frown at you across the room, they are the ones who smile while measuring you for a dagger's sheath. With that, she inclined her head and moved away. Her words echoed Mara's and my own fleeting vision. I felt exposed again, the momentary triumph of the dance fading. Seeking a moment of respite, I slipped through a side archway that led to a narrower balcony overlooking a smaller, darker courtyard below. The cold air was a shock, clearing the heat and scent of the hall from my head. I was not alone. A man stood in the shadows, his back to me, looking down into the dark. He was tall, dressed in unadorned dark clothes. As I turned to leave, he spoke, his voice low and smooth. The moon is sharp tonight, a good night for seeing, is it not, Moonspeaker? I stopped, he turned. It was not a face I recognized from the court introductions. He was older than Cadden, with sharp, intelligent features and eyes that held a cold, assessing light. This was the feeling from the hall, this was the gray presence. I do not believe we have been introduced, I said, keeping my voice level. We have not. My interests keep me from court until now. He took a step closer. I held my ground, my hand finding the cold stone of the balustrade. The return of a Moonspeaker is a momentous event. It shifts balances, creates opportunities. What is your interest in balance? I asked. My interest is in power, lady, true power, the kind that does not roar but whispers, the kind your ancestors understood. His gaze fell to the pendant at my throat. The heart of sight has awakened. It is a key, but a key requires a lock. Do you know what lock it opens? Every instinct screamed danger. The only lock I am concerned with is the one on my chamber door, sir, if you will excuse me. I moved to go, but his voice stopped me, softer now, almost hypnotic. He hasn't told you everything, you know. The orb shows possibilities, not certainties, and your king, he carries a secret that even the heart of sight might not reveal, a weakness in his proud armor. Ask him about the eclipse. Ask him what truly happened the night his parents died. A chill that had nothing to do with the night air seized me. Before I could respond, the archway curtain was pushed aside, and Rylan, my guard, stepped onto the balcony, his hand on the hilt of his sword. My lady, is everything well? The man in the shadows gave a slight, mocking bow. Our conversation is at an end. A pleasure, Lady Ara, we will speak again. He melted into the deeper shadows at the far end of the balcony and was gone. Rylan was at my side instantly. Who was that? I don't know, I whispered, my heart pounding. He wasn't at the feast. Rylan's face was grim. Come, we return to the king. Now, as he led me back into the blazing, noisy hall, the stranger's words echoed in my mind, a poisoned dart amidst the music. The eclipse, a weakness, a key and a lock, the feast of masks was over. The true game, it seemed, had just begun. Cadden's relaxed demeanor from the dance vanished the moment Rylan delivered his quiet report. He listened, his expression hardening into the unyielding mask of the sovereign. Without a word, he excused us from the high table, his grip on my arm firm as he led me not back to the Sunstone chambers, but to his own private war room, a small, windowless chamber dominated by a large map-strewn table and smelling of old parchment and steel. Mara and Lord Thanric were summoned. Rylan stood guard outside the door. Describe him again, Cadden commanded, his voice clipped. I did, detailing the man's sharp features, his cold eyes, his cryptic words. When I repeated the term the eclipse, a palpable tension crackled in the room. Thanric and Mara exchanged a glance. "You know this man," I stated. "We know of him," Thanric corrected, his voice gravelly. "Or we know of the name he uses. He calls himself Silas. He is a collector of antiquities, a dealer in rare texts and relics. He moves in the shadows between territories, owes allegiance to no alpha. It is said he has a particular fascination with the old magics, the pre-alpha religions, a vulture circling old bones," Mara muttered, "and the eclipse," I pressed, looking at Cadden. He had turned to the map, his back to us, his shoulders rigid. For a long moment he said nothing. The silence stretched. "It was the name given to the plot that killed my parents," he said finally, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "A coordinated strike by a cabal of traditionalists who believed my father was too progressive, too willing to treat with omegas as near equals. They used the cover of a lunar eclipse to move their forces. My mother was their primary target. She was the voice for change. My father died defending her. The weight of the confession filled the small room. This was the wound at the heart of his reign, the source of his scars and his suspicion. Silas suggests you have not told me everything about that night," I said gently. Cadden turned, his eyes blazing with a pain he usually kept buried. "What is there to tell? They died, I lived. The conspirators were rooted out and executed." Thanric cleared his throat. "Not all, my king. The leader of the cabal, Alaric, his body was never positively identified. He vanished into the chaos of the night. He is dead," Cadden said, a finality in his tone that brooked no argument. "The eclipse died with him." But the doubt had been sown. Silas's words were a seed of venom, a weakness in his proud armor. "Why approach Ara?" Mara asked, practical as ever. "What does he want?" "He sees her as a tool," Thanric said grimly. "The awakened moonspeaker, the heart of sight responding in the old lore, such a confluence was said to be able to unlock more than visions. Some legends speak of vaults, of hidden knowledge sealed away by the first sovereigns, knowledge of power. And he believes I am the key," I finished, the pieces clicking into a terrifying picture. "He wants me to find this lock for him." "He will try to manipulate you," Cadden said, striding back to me, his gaze intense. "He will use half-truths and insinuations to turn you against me to make you doubt." Do I have reason to doubt? The question hung in the air. Cadden's jaw tightened. He looked from me to Thanric and Mara. "Leave us." When the door shut behind them, he was upon me in 2 strides, but not in anger. He took my face in his hands, his touch desperate. "Ara, listen to me. That night, it is a wound that has never closed. There are things I do not speak of because the memory is a howling void. My mother's last act was to shove me into a hidden passage. The last thing I saw was my father falling. The last thing I heard was her scream. His thumbs stroked my cheeks. If there are secrets from that night, they died with them. I have spent my life trying to ensure such a thing never happens again. You are part of that promise, a future built on something better than blood and fear." I believed him. I believed the raw pain in his eyes, but I also believed Silas was a real threat and that the past was not as buried as Cadden wished. "He will approach me again," I said. "I will double your guard. You will not be alone. That may not stop him. He deals in information, in secrets. He will find a way." An idea, cold and clear, formed in my mind. We must use it. Cadden's eyes narrowed. "What? We cannot just defend. He has shown his interest. Let me explore it, carefully. Under Ryland's watch, always. If he wants to talk about the old ways, let him. I am a scholar of the old ways, am I not?" A grim determination settled in me. I can be the bait in a trap. We might learn what he truly seeks, who he works for. Absolutely not. Cadden's refusal was instant. "It is too dangerous." Is it more dangerous than waiting for him to strike from the shadows, to poison the court against me with whispers? "You said I must grow roots of iron." This is what that looks like. I will not be a passive pawn, Cadden, not for him and not for you. We stood in stalemate, the will of the king against the resolve of the Moonspeaker. Finally, he released a long, slow breath, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "You are relentless. I am what survival made me." He rested his forehead against mine. "You will take every precaution. Rylan is your shadow. You report every word, every glance to me, and at the first sign of true danger it ends." Agreed. It was a new bargain, struck not in a bedchamber but in a war room, a partnership in deception. As we stood there, a plan forming in the space between our shared breath, I felt the path from the orb's vision solidify further. This was the work, facing hidden threats, not just ceremonial ones. The echo of my grandmother's voice seemed to whisper in the stone room, "The heart they cannot take, but it could be used. It could be strong enough to face the darkness and cunning enough to use its own tools against it." The next week passed in a tense, structured rhythm. My life became a performance within a performance. Publicly, I was the studious, slightly aloof Moonspeaker, attending court sessions with Cadden, walking in the gardens with Mara, politely declining most social invitations. Privately, I was laying a trail of bait. Following a plan devised with Cadden and a reluctantly cooperative Lord Thanric, I began requesting specific, obscure texts from the castle archives, scrolls on pre-alpha lunar rituals, treatises on the symbolic architecture of the first fortresses, genealogies of the extinct Moonspeaker families. The requests were discreet but findable by someone with the right ears in the librarian's network. I also made a point of visiting the seer's chamber twice more, always with Rylan, a stern presence at the tower door. I didn't touch the heart of sight, but I would sit quietly near the pedestal, as if in meditation. Let Silas's spies report that the Moonspeaker was communing with the relic, seeking deeper knowledge. Cadden played his part, his public demeanor toward me one of respectful alliance, his private visits to the Sunstone chambers a mix of strategic planning and quiet, deepening connection. We spoke less of the court and more of ourselves, childhood memories, hopes that had nothing to do with crowns or spirits. In those moments, the bond between us felt less like a mystical fate and more like a steadily built, real affection, a fortress stronger for having a foundation. The trap was set, we waited. The strike came not in shadow but in sunlight. I was in the walled garden, sketching the dormant layout of the herb beds on a parchment, planning what I might plant come spring. Rylan stood watch at the entrance, a silent statue. A servant girl approached him, curtsied, and handed him a sealed note. He read it, his brow furrowing, then walked over to me. "My lady, a message from the king. He requests your immediate presence in the map room, an urgent matter concerning the eastern border." It was the code phrase for a genuine summons from Cadden, but something felt off. The servant girl had scurried away too quickly, and Cadden had seen me just that morning. He would have mentioned a border crisis. I met Rylan's eyes. "Is the seal correct?" He looked at the note again, his face tightening. "It is the king's seal, but the wax is smudged, as if pressed in haste." He was already moving, hand on his sword. "We go together now." We moved swiftly through the corridors. The map room was in the administrative wing, usually busy with clerks and messengers. Today, the corridor leading to it was curiously empty. Rylan pushed the door open, his body shielding mine. The room was dim, the large map table empty. Cadden was not there, but Silas was. He stood by the cold hearth, examining a carved stone paperweight. He looked up as if we were expected guests. "Lady Ara and the ever-vigilant Rylan, my apologies for the subterfuge, but a private conversation is so hard to arrange." Rylan drew his sword halfway from its scabbard. "Step away, now." "There is no need for steel," Silas said calmly, setting the paperweight down. "I come only to talk. The king is quite safe, inspecting the granaries, I believe, a small fiction necessary to ensure your cooperation." His cold eyes settled on me. "You have been seeking knowledge." "I have it. I seek knowledge for my king," I said, keeping my voice steady though my heart hammered against my ribs. This was the moment. Do you seek it for yourself to understand the power you hold? The Heart of Sight did not just show you pretty visions of crowns and cradles, did it? It showed you a lock, a great dark door in the depths of this very mountain. I froze, he was right. Among the flashes of future joy in the orb's light, there had been one darker, fleeting image, a vast, sealed door of black stone, covered in etched moons and wolves deep underground. I had dismissed it as symbolic, a representation of the challenges ahead, but the certainty in his voice. Silas smiled, a thin, predatory curve of his lips. Ah, I see it in your eyes, you have seen it, the vault of the First Pact, where the original Alpha and Moonspeaker sovereigns sealed away the source of their unity and the source of their power. The stories call it the Well of Echoes, a font of the very energy that allows your communion, my dear, and it is dying, starved for 3 centuries since the last Moonspeaker faded. Rylan had his sword fully drawn now. My lady, we are leaving. If it dies, Silas continued, ignoring the blade pointed at him, your gift will fade, your line ends with you, and this kingdom will forever be trapped in this crude parody of balance, alphas ruling by brute force, omegas as ornaments or bargaining chips. Is that the future you want? Or do you want to restore the true power, the power that made your ancestors the equals of kings? His words were a siren song, playing on my deepest fears and hopes. To lose my sight would be to lose a part of my soul. To restore the old, true power, the king knows of this vault, I asked. Silas's smile turned pitying. His family has guarded the secret of its location for generations, and they have let it wither. They fear what they cannot control. Your Cadden is no different. He wants your gifts, but only the tame, useful parts. He will never let you near the well. It is the one secret he keeps from you, the weakness in his lineage, their failure to uphold the First Pact. Enough, Rylan barked. My lady, he speaks poison. We must go. I looked from Silas's confident, chilling face to Rylan's earnest, protective one. The bait had been taken, but the predator was far more dangerous than we had anticipated. He wasn't just a relic hunter. He was an ideologue, and he had just revealed a truth or a devastating lie that threatened to crack the foundation of everything Cadden and I were building. The conversation is over, I said to Silas, finding my voice. Rylan. As we backed out of the room, Silas called out, his voice soft but carrying. The eclipse is not just a past tragedy, Moonspeaker. It is a recurring event, and another is coming. When the moon goes dark, so too can a king's hidden weaknesses be exposed. Ask him. Ask Cadden what truly guards the vault, then decide whose side you are on. The door shut behind us. Rylan immediately posted 2 additional guards at the map room with orders to detain Silas, but I knew he would already be gone, vanished into some hidden passage known only to a collector of antiquities. We walked back to the Sunstone Chambers in silence, the weight of Silas's revelations a physical burden. He had planted a seed of devastating doubt. Did Cadden know of this vault, this dying well of echoes? Was he, out of fear or control, letting the source of my very being wither away? And the final, haunting question, what truly guards the vault, I had agreed to be bait. I had not anticipated that the hook would pierce so deep, drawing not just blood, but the very faith my new life was built upon. I did not go to Cadden immediately. I needed to think, to process the poison without his presence acting as an antidote. I retreated to my chambers, dismissing Alara with a request for solitude. I stood at the window, staring at the walled garden without seeing it. Silas's words echoed, a toxic refrain, a dying well, a hidden vault, a secret kept. My hand went to my pendant, had my grandmother known. Had she felt her own gift diminishing, starved by generations of neglect, was that the true sickness the Rivermist Council had sensed, not madness but a connection to a fading source? Hours later, when Cadden entered without announcement, his face was a storm cloud. Rylan told me. Why did you not come to me at once? I turned from the window. I needed to hear my own thoughts first. "And what do your thoughts say?" he asked, his voice tight with a mix of concern and frustration. They ask questions. About a vault of the first pact, a well of echoes, a secret your family has kept for generations. The color drained from his face, it was all the confirmation I needed. The fracture I felt was not just in my trust, but in the air between us. How he began, then stopped, closing his eyes. "Sila's, he says it is dying, that my gift is tied to it, that you know this and have done nothing." My voice was frighteningly calm. "Is it true?" He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of rare agitation. "It is not that simple. Tell me the simple version, then." He paced to the hearth, staring into the cold ashes. "The vault exists, deep beneath the oldest part of the fortress. The Well of Echoes is there. It is not a source of power, Ara. It is a repository, a concentration point of the natural energy that flows through the world. The First Pact was not just a political alliance, it was a magical covenant. The Alpha and Moonspeaker sovereigns were its stewards, using the well's energy to strengthen their bond and their rule, to see clearly and lead wisely." He turned to face me, his eyes haunted. "But that kind of power is a temptation. Later generations began to use it for more direct purposes. To intimidate, to dominate, the energy became corrupted, unstable. My ancestor, the third king, sealed the vault. He broke the physical key. The original heart of sight was shattered. What rests in the tower is the largest remaining fragment. He decreed the vault should remain sealed until a true pair, a fated Alpha and Moonspeaker of pure intent, could reopen it safely and restore the covenant. And you never thought to tell me this." The hurt broke through the calm. "I wanted to. But Ara, the vault is not just sealed, it is guarded. The corruption that tainted the well did not just vanish, it coalesced. The legends say it formed a guardian, a being of shadow and reflection, born of the greed and fear of those who misused the power. To approach the vault unprepared is death. My own father tried after my mother's death in his grief. He believed the well's power could have saved her. He never returned. The guards who went after him found only his cloak shredded at the sealed door." The pain in his voice was raw. This was the true secret, the true weakness. Not just a hidden room, but a lethal legacy, a monster born of his family's past sins. "So you were going to let my gift fade instead?" I whispered. "No. I was going to wait, to prepare, to build our bond, our trust, our strength first. The orb's vision showed us a path, but it is a long one. I believed we had time." He came to me, gripping my shoulders. "Silas doesn't want to restore the covenant. He wants to crack the vault open and siphon the corrupted energy for himself. He believes he can control it. He is wrong. It would destroy him and likely this entire mountain with him." I believed Cadden. The terror in his eyes was not of exposure, but of loss. Yet the fracture remained. "You kept this from me. You let me walk into a game with Silas without knowing the true stakes. You made me your partner in strategy, but not in this, the most crucial truth of all. I was trying to protect you. I do not need protection from the truth. I need the truth to protect myself." The words burst from me, sharp and hot. "I am not a figurine to be placed on a shelf until the time is right, Cadden. I am the Moonspeaker. This is my legacy too. My danger to face." We stood in stifling silence, the chasm between us yawning wide. The bond was still there, a painful, taut wire, but it was strained near to breaking. "What does Silas mean?" I asked finally, my voice hoarse. "About an eclipse coming, about a king's weakness being exposed." Cadden's grip tightened. "The Guardian, the legends say it is strongest when the moon is dark. An eclipse weakens the natural energies, gives the shadow more power. The night my parents died was an eclipse. I have always wondered if the eclipse cabal didn't just use the darkness as cover, if they somehow stirred the Guardian, used it as a weapon. The horror of it settled over me. It was worse than I imagined. The political conspiracy was intertwined with a magical abomination. "Sila's plans to use the next eclipse," I said, the conclusion inescapable. "To use the Guardian's heightened power or to bypass it when it is occupied. He needs me to open the vault. He will not have you. Cadden's voice was a vow, low and fierce. You cannot stop him by hiding me, I said, pulling away from his grasp. The decision crystallized within me, cold and clear. He has made his move, we must make ours. You have given me the truth, however late, now we must act on it together. Not as protector and protected, but as the stewards we are supposed to be. He searched my face, seeing the resolve there. The king in him warred with the man who feared for me. Finally the king nodded, together, but we prepare. We find every scrap of lore on the Guardian, on the original pact. We train, and when the eclipse comes, he looked toward the window as if he could see the distant, approaching shadow of the moon. We face it, not as a king and his seer, but as the first pair must have, as one. It was a reconciliation, but a fragile one built on a foundation of shared peril rather than repaired trust. The fracture was mended, but the scar would remain. We had moved from a courtship to a war council. The path ahead led not to a sunlit throne room, but into the deepest dark beneath the mountain. The countdown to the eclipse had begun. The following days were a frenzy of clandestine activity. The court continued its oblivious dance, but within the sunstone chambers in Cadden's private study, a different kind of work was underway. Mara and a select, trusted scribe helped us gather every mention of the vault, the well, and the Guardian from the fragmented archives. Lord Thanric, brought fully into the secret, used his network to track Salaz's movements, though the man had vanished like smoke. What we pieced together was a patchwork of myth and terrifying fact. The Guardian had no true name. The texts referred to it as the reflection, the price of greed, the shadow in the well. It was described not as a beast, but as a mutable entity that took the form of its victims' deepest fears or most hidden flaws, reflecting them back with lethal force. It was strong, but bound to the immediate vicinity of the vault door. Its power waxed with the waning moon, peaking during an eclipse. The original heart of sight had been the key and the shield. A true pair, their bond resonating with pure intent, could use its power to calm the Guardian, to pass it safely and reseal the vault after drawing from the well. The shattered fragment in the tower still held a resonance, but it was untested. It is a test, I said one night, surrounded by crumbling scrolls, not just of power, but of partnership. The Guardian punishes selfishness. It can only be passed by a union stronger than the individual fears within it. Cadden nodded grimly. My father went alone in grief and desperation. He failed. The Eclipse Cabal may have found a way to agitate it, to turn it into a trap, but they could not pass it either. They sought to destroy the legacy, not restore it. We also trained. Not with swords, though Cadden insisted I learn basic dagger work from Rylan, but with our bond. We sat for hours in the seer's chamber, our hands on the crystal fragment, not seeking visions, but seeking union. We practiced pouring our focus into a single point, calming our separate fears, speaking without words. It was more intimate than any physical joining, a fusion of will and spirit. The orb would glow softly, responding to our harmony, and in those moments the fracture between us healed, replaced by a steely, shared purpose. The date of the next total lunar eclipse was calculated by the castle astrologer, in 9 nights. The knowledge hung over us like a sword. 5 nights before the eclipse, Salaz made contact again, not in person but through a message left on my pillow in the Sunstone chambers, bypassing Rylan and the guards. A single piece of vellum, smelling of cold stone and myrrh. The moon's eye closes in 4 nights' time. Meet me at the entrance to the old spice cellars at the stroke of midnight. Come alone if you wish to save your king from his own legacy. Tell no one, or the eclipse will claim its second royal blood. It was a blatant manipulation, but a potent one. It played on my deepest fear, that Cadden would charge in unprepared and meet his father's fate. I showed it to him immediately. It's a trap to take you, he said, crushing the note in his fist. Of course it is, but it's also an opportunity. He's showing us his entry point, the old spice cellars. There must be a forgotten passage there that leads to the deeper vaults. I met his furious gaze. We don't go at midnight, we go at dusk with Thanric's most trusted men. We secure the entrance. We turn his trap into ours. It was a risk, but waiting for the eclipse night itself was a greater one. Cadden, after a tense argument with Thanric about security, agreed. The old spice cellars were in the Undercroft, a maze of dusty, low-ceilinged rooms long since abandoned for better storage. At dusk, we moved Cadden, myself, Rylan, and 6 of Thanric's hand-picked guards, all armed and armored in quiet leather. We found the entrance Sila's meant, a section of wall that, when pressure was applied to a specific stone, swung inward with a groan of disuse, revealing a descending staircase carved from the living rock. The air that wafted up was ancient, dry, and carried a faint, metallic tang. Cadden took the lead, sword drawn. I followed, the fragment of the Heart of Sight wrapped in silk and tucked into my belt, its presence a cold, reassuring weight. Rylan was at my back. The stairs went down and down, far below the level of the dungeons. The temperature dropped. The only light came from our torches, casting leaping shadows on walls slick with mineral seepage. The architecture changed from worked stone to rough-hewn cave, the passage of the first builders. We reached a landing. Before us stretched a natural cavern, its ceiling lost in darkness. And at the far end, illuminated by a single, ghostly shaft of moonlight from some fissure high above, was the door. It was exactly as the orb had shown me, massive, made of a polished black stone that drank the light. Across its surface, etched in lines of silver that seemed to move in the torchlight, were phases of the moon and running wolves. It was magnificent and terrifying, but we were not alone. Silas stepped from the shadows beside the door, not surprised. He held a strange, crystalline lantern that emitted a cold, blue light, punctual but not as requested. I expected the Moonspeaker to have more courage. "Where is your master, Alaric?" Cadden's voice echoed in the cavern. "Does the leader of the eclipse still fear to show his face?" Silas's composure flickered. Alaric is gone. His work continues through those who see the future clearly, a future of pure power, unconstrained by sentimental covenants. So, Alaric was dead, but his ideology lived on. Silas was the new head of the Serpent. "The door remains sealed, Silas," I said, stepping forward. "You cannot open it without me, and I will not help you." "You misunderstand," he said, his smile returning. "I do not need you to open it willingly." He raised his lantern. The blue light intensified, and he began to chant in a guttural, forgotten tongue. The silver etchings on the black door flared. A low hum vibrated through the stone beneath our feet. From the darkness around the door, the air itself seemed to ripple and coalesce. The guardian awoke. It did not form as a monster. It flowed out like spilled ink, taking shape from the shadows of our own party. Before Cadden, it solidified into the figure of his father, kingly, stern, but with eyes that were pits of disappointment. "You are weak," it whispered with his father's voice. "You repeat my mistakes, you will lose everything, as I did." Cadden recoiled, his face ashen. Before Rylan, it became a faceless opponent he had failed to defeat in a long-ago tournament, pointing an accusing blade, and before me, it became my grandmother. Not as she was in life, but as she might have been in despair. Her face was lined with sorrow, her eyes empty. "You have traded your gift for a gilded cage," the specter mourned. "You have betrayed our blood, the sight will leave you and you will be nothing. A hollow queen in a loveless court." The words were a physical blow, striking at the very insecurities I had battled since arriving. The fear of losing myself, of being merely an ornament. I gasped, the pain of it freezing me in place. Silas laughed. "The reflection shows truth. See your weaknesses, your fears will consume you, and I will take the Moonspeaker while you are paralyzed." The guardian forms advanced. Cadden, shaking off the horror of his father's image, raised his sword, but it passed through the shadow harmlessly. Steel could not hurt this thing. This was the test, not of force but of spirit. I fumbled for the sill-cracked fragment at my belt. My hands were trembling. The image of my despairing grandmother loomed over me, whispering failure. I looked past it to Cadden. He was fighting not the shadow but the shame on his own face. Our eyes met across the cavern, together. The word passed between us, unspoken. I ripped the silk away, clutching the crystal fragment. It was cold, then warm, then blazing with the same light I had seen in the tower. I didn't try to use it alone. I poured my will into it, not to banish my fear, but to accept it. The fear of being hollow was real, but it was not my entirety. I was also courage and choice and growing roots of iron. Simultaneously, I felt Cadden's will join mine through our bond, a surge of defiant strength. He acknowledged his fear of failure, but embraced his determination to build something new. Our combined focus, our acceptance, flowed into the heart of sight. The crystal's light changed from white to a calm, silvery blue. It washed over the cavern. The shadowy forms of the guardian wavered. My grandmother's image softened. The disappointment in her eyes faded, replaced by the real love I remembered. She smiled, a true smile, and faded into mist. Cadden's father gave a slow, approving nod before dissipating. The guardian did not attack. It retreated, flowing back into the shadows around the door, becoming a passive, watchful presence once more. The cavern was silent, save for our ragged breathing. Silas stared, his triumphant smirk gone, replaced by stunned fury. "No, that's not the corruption should have. The corruption is fed by fear and greed," I said, my voice steady, the fragment pulsing warmly in my hand. "We did not bring any." With a snarl, Silas drew a dagger from his robe, an ancient, jagged thing made of the same black stone as the door. "Then I will take the power the old way." He lunged not at us but at the black door, aiming the dagger at its center as if to stab it. "No," Cadden shouted, but it was too late. The dagger struck the silver etching of a full moon. A sound like 1,000 cracking glaciers filled the cavern. A web of black lines radiated from where the dagger struck. The silver etchings flared once, blindingly, then went dark. The great black door did not open, it shattered. The shattering of the door was not an explosion of stone, but a silent, violent unraveling of reality. One moment the massive slab was there, the next it was a swirling vortex of darkness and fragmented silver light. A wave of force, silent and cold, threw us all backward. Torches were snuffed out. Silas's blue lantern shattered, plunging us into absolute blackness. Then a new light emerged from the now open maw of the vault. A sickly, pulsating greenish-silver glow, like corrupted moonlight. It seeped out, illuminating the cavern in ghastly shades. A wind howled from the opening, carrying a cacophony of whispers, echoes of ancient prayers, screams of long-dead kings, the greedy thoughts of those who had corrupted the well. The guardian, whose form had stabilized into a shapeless, swirling mass of shadow at the edge of the light, let out a soundless shriek of agony. It was tied to the seal was broken. Silas scrambled to his feet, his face lit by the foul glow, transfixed by triumph and terror. "The power, it's free." He took a step toward the seeping light. "Don't," I screamed, but it was useless. The moment he crossed the threshold of broken stone, the corrupted light reacted. It coiled around him like a serpent. He didn't scream, he gasped, his body arching as the energy flooded into him. For a second he shone with terrible power, his eyes blazing green. Then the light turned inwards. His form began to blur, to distort. His triumphant cry became a gurgle as the very echoes he had sought to claim consumed him. His body dissolved into the swirling energy, adding his own scream to the chorus of the damned. He was gone, unmade by the greed he served. The unstable energy, now agitated, began to spill more vigorously from the vault, creeping across the cavern floor like acidic mist. Where it touched, the stone cracked and hissed. "The well is ruptured." Cadden yelled over the howling wind of echoes. "The corruption is leaking out, it will consume the mountain." The vision from the orb of us searching through texts for a solution flashed before me. This was the unseen threat, not just a political enemy, but a magical cataclysm. The Heart of Sight fragment in my hand was burning hot, reacting to the unleashed energy. I could feel it, a desperate, pained resonance from deep within the vault. The well was not just a source, it was a living thing, wounded and bleeding poison. We have to seal it. I shouted, the door is gone, the original key is shattered. Cadden's face was etched with despair in the ghastly light. Then the knowledge came. Not from a scroll, but from the crystal in my hand, from the echoes whispering in the air, from the bond that thrummed between Cadden and I. It was an understanding that slipped into my mind, whole and complete. The first pact. It was not about a door or a key, it was about a pattern, a harmony. The door was just a focus, I cried, grabbing Cadden's arm. The true seal is the covenant itself, the bond of the stewards. We have to remake the pact here and now. We have to give the well a new pattern to hold. He understood instantly. In this, we were one mind. How? With this, I held up the crystal fragment, and with us, we have to go in. We have to reach the well itself and reshape the energy with our union. It was madness to walk into that corrosive storm of echoes, but there was no other choice. Hand in hand, we ran toward the shattered entrance. The corrupted light lashed at us. It felt like walking into a blizzard of needles and nightmares. Whispers assailed us, my grandmother's voice again, Cadden's father, Silas's taunts, the collective fear and avarice of centuries. We held on to each other, onto the anchor of our bond. The fragment glowed, a pure defiant silver against the green sickness. We pushed it before us like a shield. The vault was a small, round chamber. In its center was not a pool, but a swirling column of luminescent energy, the well of echoes. But it was laced with thick, black veins of corruption, pulsing like diseased hearts. It was beautiful and horrifying. We stood at its edge, buffeted by the raw power. I could feel the well's pain, its yearning for the clean, balanced flow it was designed for. Now, Cadden yelled. We raised our joined hands, the crystal clasped between our palms. We did not chant, we did not perform a ritual, we simply were. We opened the bond between us completely, all the trust, the conflict, the forgiveness, the shared purpose, the growing love. We offered it not as a weapon, but as a template. We poured that union into the Heart of Sight. The fragment blazed with a light so pure it was colorless. It shot a beam into the corrupted column of the well. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the black veins recoiled. The sickly green light faltered. The cacophony of whispers shifted, the screams fading, the prayers growing stronger. The well began to spin faster, but now in a different pattern. The corruption didn't vanish, it was integrated, transformed. The black veins softened to gray, then to silver, woven into the whole like the memory of a lesson learned. The light from the well shifted from green to the serene, silvery blue of a clear moonlit night. The howling wind died. The creeping mist in the cavern outside drew back, seeping into the stone and healing the cracks it had made. The silence that followed was profound, ringing, and clean. In the center of the chamber, the well of echoes spun peacefully, a column of harmonious, potent energy. The guardian, now a calm, dark pool of shadow resting at the well's base, pulsed once with a contented, protective warmth. We lowered our hands. The crystal fragment was cool, its light dimmed. But the connection between Cadden and I felt forged in adamant, stronger and deeper than ever before. We had faced the reflection of our fears and the corruption of the past, and we had not broken. We had remade something. Exhaustion hit us like a physical wave. We slumped together, leaning against the wall of the now sanctified vault. Outside, Rylan and the guards cautiously entered the cavern, their faces awestruck as they took in the peaceful light and the sealed, now smooth wall where the door had been. A new door had formed, not of black stone, but of the same living rock as the cavern, marked only with a single, simple etching of a wolf and a moon, intertwined. Cadden looked at me, his eyes reflecting the well's new light. The pact is remade. The stewards are in place, I replied softly. We had come into the dark seeking to trap a shadow. We had found, instead, the foundation of our future. The eclipse was over. Not just the celestial event, but the cycle of fear, secrecy, and corruption it represented. As we helped each other to our feet and walked, weary but unbroken, out of the depths, I knew the path ahead was clear. There would still be court politics, still be challenges, still be moments of doubt, but the core was solid. We had faced the echo of the worst the past could offer and had answered it with a new covenant. The Moonspeaker had found her echo not in the whispers of spirits alone, but in the joined heartbeat of a king. And together they would build a kingdom where the balance was not a legend, but a living, breathing truth.